As I mentioned previously, one of the goals of the MVC framework is to be testable. Specifically, your controllers should be very testable. I should be able to exercise the logic that's inside of a controller action from a unit test and write asserts to make sure that the logic inside is behaving correctly. Unfortunately, there are no test tools built into Visual Web Developer Express Edition. But that's okay. There are plenty of free open source projects that allow you to write unit tests with C# and Visual Studio. Let me demonstrate how you could do this. I'm going to add a new project to my solution. So my solution includes my web project. We're going to add another project. It's going to be a class library, which just produces a DLL, an assembly. It's not something that we run to produce a UI or run to produce HTML output. It's just going to be a DLL that the test runner will execute. We'll call this odefood.tests. The next step is to go out and find ourselves a testing framework. And I'm going to right-click on the project and select Add Library Package Reference. Behind the scenes, this is using a tool called NuGet, which allows me to go online and look at all of the NuGet packages. So NuGet is a package manager. It understands how to download software. It understands the dependencies that that software has. It can automatically extract things and reference the proper libraries that I need from my project. You can see there's a large list of tools and libraries that NuGet can see. What I'm going to do is search for a specific one called NUnit, which is a unit testing framework that's been around in the .NET ecosystem for a long time, and just click Install on this. That's going to pull down NUnit, the package, extract it, add a reference inside of my project to the NUnit assembly. It's finished installing, so I'll click Close, and there you can see NUnit.framework, NUnit.mocks, both as references inside of my test assembly. I'm also going to need a reference to my web project, Ode to Food, because that contains the classes that we're going to instantiate inside of our tests. And then there's one more reference that I will probably need, and that is a reference to the system.web.mvc assembly, because we're also going to be using some types inside of there. For this one, I can just go to C, Program Files, Microsoft ASP.NET. There will be an ASP.NET MVC3 directory inside of there. And then inside of assemblies, you'll find system.web.mvc.dll. And that should give us all of the assembly references that we need to write our tests. The first thing I want to do is rename class1.cs to homecontrollertests.cs, and Visual Studio will automatically rename my class also. Now let me add an attribute to this class. The name of this attribute is testFixture. This is a piece of metadata that NUnit will go looking for to identify where to find test code. To use this attribute, I need to use the NUnit.framework namespace. So we will bring that in. And now we can start writing tests. So what should our first test be? One of the things that we should do in a controller in the index action of the home controller is put a message into the view bag. So let's write a test to make sure that that in fact happens. And we could scope this class a little bit differently to say what we're going to have here in this particular test fixture will just be tests for the index action. And then our test could be puts message in viewBag. And so inside of here, I can instantiate the home controller. We're going to have to bring the namespace for the home controller in here also. The control period will bring down that little drop-down list that allows you to select that namespace easily, as long as Visual Studio can identify that type somewhere inside of your solution. So now we have ode to food.controllers. That using statement is here. Let's get a result from the index action just by invoking it. So you can see controllers are easy to instantiate. You can just invoke the methods and look at the result. In this case, we want to look at that viewBag property. By default, result is just going to be of type action result. It turns out that this view that we're returning is actually a type derived from action result. It's of type view result. If we actually change the return type of that index method to be view result, then it's a little bit easier to write our test because we don't have to coerce the return value of controller.index, we should just be able to say result.viewBag. And what we can do is we can assert that viewBag.message is not null. That can be our first test. Let's do a quick build, and everything builds. Now we want to run this test to see if it passes. When we installed NUnit with the NuGet package manager, NuGet should have created inside of the folder where our solution lives a packages folder, and indeed we can see that there right beside the SLN file, which is our solution. That's the same solution that we see in here, odefood.sln. If we look inside of packages, we'll find NUnit, and if we look inside of NUnit, there will be a tools directory. So when you pull down the NUnit package, you also get all of the tools, which includes NUnit.exe, which is a graphical test runner. You can point it to the DLL that has your tests inside of it. It will execute those tests when you click on run and tell you what is passing and failing. There's also NUnit console, which as the name would imply is a console mode application. Again, all you have to do here is point it to the assembly that has your tests inside, which is going to be odefood.tests.dll. It will execute those tests and tell you if you are passing or failing. So here you can see that we ran one test, there were 0 errors. Every time we add a test or we make some changes to our code, we can come back out and run this tool. Behind the scenes, what is happening is that NUnit is looking at this assembly that we've pointed it to, finding all of the test fixture classes that might be inside of here, and executing all of the tests. If any of these asserts should fail, NUnit should tell us that something went wrong. In other words, if this assert failed, it means there is no message in viewBag. Let's just change viewBag.message to viewBag.message2. And I'll do a quick build, rerun the tests, and you can see that we now have a failure. We expected a not null, but something was null. We can look at the stack trace and see that this was home controller test line 18. That will point us to the test that had a problem. We could also have Visual Studio run these tests every time that we build the test project. To do that, we'll set up what's known as a post-build event. Every time we do a build, go out and run some command for us. You can right-click on a project and come into the properties, and one of the tabs here will be the build events. We're looking for a post-build event. I'm going to edit the post-build event, and what I want to do is look for a macro that specifies where my solution exists. That's going to be the solution directory. I'm going to insert that macro, $solution directory. That just means when this post-build instruction executes, that will be treated as a variable, and the value substituted in will be the folder where my solution exists. We know that underneath of that there is a packages directory that contains NUnit, and we have to get the version number right here. It's NUnit 2.5.9.10348, and then we'll look in tools and we'll run NUnit console, and we'll run it against our test assembly. There's a macro for this too. It is called target path. Right here you can see that contains the full path to our test assembly, which is test.dll. So let me select target path and do an insert. This will be the post build event command line. Click OK to add that to this window, and then if we save everything, now I can hit Shift-Control-B to do a build. Visual Studio will also run NUnit console against my test assembly, and you can see that we came up with an error in the error list. If I look at the output, we'll see the same output that we saw in the console mode window, including the stack trace, and something that was expected to be not null was actually null. So let's go back and fix this problem. We'll put in viewBag.message, Shift-Control-B to do a build again, and this time all of the tests should pass. And indeed, we have one test run and 0 errors. What we've done with the post-build event is just execute the same command that we were running in this console window, but we've parameterized it and automated it. And pretty much any of the unit testing frameworks you'll find will work the same way as what I've demonstrated here. Many of them just use different names for the attributes and the assertions. This is all the time we have to talk about testing right now. This quick demonstration just was intended to show you that it can be easy to test the logic in your presentation layer, specifically the logic that you have in your controllers. Controllers are relatively plain C# classes. You can instantiate them without having a web server or web browser or HTTP request running. And compared to the view, they are the ones doing all the hard work. Remember, views are simple in the MVC design pattern. We just use them as templates to control the placement of data.